Okay, I'm sat here this morning with one of our graduates from our, the Religion, Philosophy and Ethics course here at Gloucestershire, Kaylee Davis, who did the course a few years ago.
Yeah, about 4.
So since graduating, has become a teacher in the Worcester area and teaches religious studies and various things. And there were some questions that had come from working with your pupils that you wanted to talk about today.
Yeah, the first area I'd like us to concentrate on is science versus religion. So whether or not scientific theories have anything in common with Christian teachings.
Because it's quite common, I think, for people to assume that they're just completely at loggerheads, that Christianity, if you believe in a certain version of Christianity, then you have to either reject science or you're not interested in science. And do you find that amongst your pupils, that they kind of see them in conflict?
There doesn't seem to be an area for them to see them as compatible.
Where, of course, many practicing Christians, of course, would perhaps take the view that there's no conflict at all, especially more liberal Christians in that they don't take every word in the Bible as being literal, would say, well, no, actually, that's completely untrue. That you can see the scientific world actually as the kind of marvel and the outworking of God's creation. The complexity in it, the awe, the amazingness in it, is actually part of the nature of God. It actually reflects well upon God's character. And I think in conflict with some of the stereotypes, certainly in this country, the majority of Christians probably believe in evolution, to see God not so much as having created the world in a literal interpretation of Genesis, but having put in process that set of events that leads to things. So there isn't, I think, easily that conflict. And of course, many scientists have been believers. You know, in practice, we've seen not all scientists are atheists. It's kind of the stereotype. But I think it's quite common for kids, perhaps because of the polarised narrative in the public domain, in the press and things, Christianity and science are always opposed. And I think that leads young people often to believe that you've got to opt for one or the other. And that's not necessarily true, I think.
I think at the moment, science appears to be the most popular theory. So a lot of students have an issue with accepting any Christian teachings at all. So
I think because a literal interpretation of Christianity would conflict with the scientific worldview, they just reject the whole thing.
Yeah.
Rather than looking as many Christian groups do and saying, well, actually, there's no conflict, we're not about answering the same questions. I mean, this is a line you often find, saying that there are two kind of worlds, and that science deals with the questions of practical matters, how do things work, and religion deals with different questions. You know, they're not stepping on each other's toes because they're not even in the same ring, as it were.
Yeah.
You know, and that religion is answering what we might call existential questions, i.e., why am I here? What's the point? What happens when I die? Is there some purpose and meaning in the universe? And to many religious people, these aren't even questions that could ever be answered scientifically. You couldn't discover anything in science that would make these questions true or false. So I think that's a common view from more kind of intellectually sophisticated, I guess, types of religion, is that they operate in different realms altogether. The difficulty, and when there's pupils and people might be right, is when religion starts to make more empirical claims. You know, when you get literalists, they say, no, we literally mean the world was created like this, and the world is only 4,000 years old. Then, of course, religion and science do conflict. And then you get a very different kind of view of how they interact.
I suppose that would be down to when you look at the wording in the Bible and how they take the word age, and whether it would actually be created in 7 days as opposed to over 7 ages. And I think a lot of modern Christians that accept scientific theories would also look at God being the reason behind evolution, giving it that shove, I suppose, to start.
And modern theories of design and design argument and kind of the process of all that tend to kind of accept, because there's so much evidence, the evolutionary process, and rather say that rather than being direction and evidence of God's design in the stuff, in the people, there's evidence of design in the process. That evolution is such an amazing and kind of efficient system for producing the most sophisticated beings that it can. The process itself shows evidence of being designed by it. So I think there's a shift in modern thinking from design theory in the stuff to design theory in the process that brings about the stuff.
Yeah.
And I think certainly, say, other than perhaps in parts of North America, it's very widespread for Christians to believe in evolution in a way that I think sometimes those outside who stereotype them don't realise they do. And that causes that kind of false conflict.
In terms of my pupils going about answering a question, how, or rather which, could you say, were the similarities between scientific and Christian teachings, and then what would be the obvious differences? You've already outlined the difference in asking how and asking why.
Yeah.
So what are the similarities,
I think
would you say?
one similarity that's, I think, quite striking is that both want to start in kind of awe of the world. They kind of, both are attempts to look at the world and say, how does this come to be? What's the kind of, what lies behind this? It's how things seem, everyday, normal stuff. But actually, the world's an inspiring, amazing place. What makes it work? And there's a religious answer, often, that might be what lies behind it in terms of meaning and purpose. And there's a scientific answer, what causes these processes and what is the chemical explanation of X, Y, and Z. But they both seem to start in a desire to comprehend and understand the world. So what really comes out of them both is starting in kind of wonder of the world. Sometimes I think stereotypes of science from a more religious perspective forget that science starts as well in awe and wonder of the world, just like religion does. It looks at the world and says, what an amazing place. How does this make sense? That's, So there's a curiosity of engagement, I think, that sits behind both. There's quite a big similarity that's sometimes missed. So I think in similarity, they're both real attempts to engage with external reality and say something valuable about it. Of course, differently, the empirical way leads to medicines and bridges and cars and things, and the other leads to kind of more reflective, contemplative response, or should. The differences we always talked about a bit before about the twin kind of, something called twin magisteriums, different realms they answer questions in. But of course, the difference as well is that in science there is the idea that there are evidential hypotheses. Makes it sound very grand. There are ideas you come up that are subject to revision based on the facts. And in religion there's this notion of faith. And there are those who will say, well, there's faith in science too, and there is to an extent. But I guess what is more noticeably different is that religion sometimes says faith is belief despite evidence, or without evidence. Dutch philosopher Søren Kierkegaard has this idea that if you think religion is about getting evidence, then you misunderstood religion. That religion is actually about not having evidence, never being sure, and believing anyway. And he talked about a leap of faith. And that's a real big difference, I think, for me, in that thinking religion is about getting better evidence than people in science is kind of missed something really important in religion, which is about living in a world of uncertainty, not being sure there's a God, God not being visible, not proving him or herself in the world, but still saying, I choose to believe. He calls them the knight of faith, the person who isn't sure and still believes. And that, I think, that has quite a kind of profound understanding of what religion is, that's not like this version of, let's see if we can out-evidence each other. And that's quite different.
Yeah, I think that is also a stark difference between science and religion, is that science obviously is looking for that evidential matter around.
Yeah.
And perhaps a lot of people see that as science always topping religion because it's there in front of you.
Yeah.
Because maybe in modern day society it's harder to take that leap of faith.
Well, I think we've sort of structured the way that we have beliefs, and we tend to think that all beliefs must have evidence. And you say, I believe that, I say, why? As we teach philosophy students, they must ask questions like that.
Yeah.
We'd be kind of not doing our duty if they didn't. But to say, well, why do you believe? Because I choose to. Because I think this belief has a transformatory effect on me and the world, say, religious answer. That doesn't chime as well with our kind of, maybe our worldview perhaps, as much as it used to. And so people are surprised to hear that answer coming from religion, but actually it fits in with the religious worldview much more kind of consistently than trying to kind of be a version of science. It just leads to kind of not working.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.